July's TBR is a little big, guys. It's a little big, and it is also a month where I don't anticipate reading as much as I usually do. So you may ask why I have added so many books to this TBR. In July, I have something happening at the beginning of the month that is equally as exciting as it is terrifying, and I will keep you posted throughout the vlogs. And then at the end of the month, I am going on holiday. I'm actually going to Comic-Con in San Diego, which is super exciting, but because of the travel time and like the time zone differences and stuff, I think I'm actually going to be away for around 11 days. So it is quite a big chunk of the month that I'm going to be missing. Now, obviously, I think my flights there are like 11 hours and then back it's 10 hours. So I have quite a bit of reading time in those moments. But aside from that, like, I just don't know how I'm kind of gonna fit reading in July, but we'll just see what happens. Some of these I have pretty much done to myself. They're not necessary. They're just things that I think I'm gonna get to in the month. I don't know why. I felt like just telling you all of my thoughts this month, so we're just gonna roll with it. And actually, I don't own the majority of the books that we're talking about today, and I'm not really quite sure how that has happened either. Starting straight from the top, the things that I definitely need to get through are the book club books. So the first one is the catch-up book club book from May and June. The live show for this, I will confirm with my host, so look out for an official post, but I think that we agreed on the 14th of July, and that I think is going to be on Sandra's channel. But the book for that is The Trouble with Peace by Jo Abercrombie, which I'm so excited to read because I loved the first book in this series, which is it A Little Hatred? I'm going to be honest, I'm staring right at it, but I don't have my glasses on, so I cannot see a thing. But this one is the second book in the Age of Madness trilogy. I can't really explain to you guys what the plot is because it's just like so many tiny little parts that are all mashed together to create this kind of situation. But we are following characters that are related to the characters from the first First Law World series, which is the First Law trilogy. They are in the industrial age and they are on the brink of like a big societal change. We have a workers' uprising that's kind of happening in this world, and the majority of our main characters are quite privileged from high positions in society, so they are going to be facing like a great upheaval of their way of life. And then in the background of that, we still have all of the countries kind of warring, trying to get an advantage over the other. And then I'm assuming that the grander plot is going to start kicking in as well, whatever that grander plot may be, but we have like kind of puppet masters in the background like making all these things happen. So I did not expect to love book one in this series, but I gave it 5 stars, and I'm really interested in seeing where the sequel takes it because I'm expecting terrible things for these characters that I've really come to, I don't want to say love, I don't want to be that invested because I know bad things are going to happen, but I am actually really invested in these characters and it's not going to be great. So for my other required book club read of the month, that is my Patreon book club, the Alpha Ho book club. We are reading the second book in the War of Lost Heart series by Carissa Broadbent. I do want to get physical copies of this actually because I really liked book 1, but book 2 is the book for June and July, and that I think is Children of Fallen Gods. So this one is a series following a girl who is a slave and she buys her way out of slavery, but she has to leave her friend behind. So she joins this order of magic wielders so that she can gain the power that she needs to go back and free her friend from slavery. But this order that she joins, like, she sees that they have the capability to do great good in the world, but potentially they don't actually use and harness their powers for good, and potentially they are almost as corrupt as the place where she has come from. We also have a romance in here as a fantasy romance series, and I'm very invested in the romantic relationship, so I'm excited to see where book 2 takes it because the general kind of thoughts I've been hearing is that people enjoy the second and third book in the series more than they enjoy the first, so I hope it's the same for me. One that I'm not looking forward to getting into because I'm pretty much reading these back to back at this point is the 10th book in the Wheel of Time series, which is The Crossroads of Twilight. Now the good news is that I think that this is the final book in the slump section of Wheel of Time, so I'm expecting much better things from the rest of the books in the series once I'm through this one, but I also think that this is the worst part of the slump, which is not ideal. This is, of course, you've heard it before, but it is a very well-known epic fantasy series that is a classic struggle between the forces of light and dark. In this series, we are following this age's dragon reborn, who is a figure that is reincarnated into every age that plays a pivotal role in this battle between good and evil, and he is going to tip the balance of the scales one way or the other for good. Now, in recent ages, it seems the dark has been winning a little bit, so it's a real struggle to kind of push things towards the light. And there's all of this like politics going on and different kind of groups around the world trying to control him and also like use him for their own ends. Not everybody is evil. Like, some people think that they're doing the right thing, but nobody's actually like can see where the dominoes fall. So I will be listening to the audiobook for this, which is why I want to get such an early start for it. The live show for this is not going to be until August, but I ended up missing the last live show because of like just a certain series of events that meant that I didn't finish the book in time. So I want to start this early enough so that I know it's going to be done before the live show without me having to really push and have to sit and listen to hours and hours of this, because that's what I can't do. Like, this series for me is best consumed in like bite-sized chunks to get me through, especially in this era of books that aren't the most compelling. Speaking of audiobooks, I did want to throw this in here because I did originally intend to listen to it in between the two Wheel of Time books, but now I think I am pretty much just going to go straight into Crossroads of Twilight. But if I do manage to finish that like earlier on in the month, I am going to be starting Waking Gods by Sylvain Nouvelle. This one is the sequel to Sleeping... Oh, Pierce Brown blubbed it. This is the sequel to Sleeping Giants, which is a adult sci-fi series that is told in a series of transcripts following this group of like scientists, engineers, army personnel who are trying to figure out why there are big robot pieces buried beneath the earth or within the earth. They start by finding this giant hand, and based on the material, like it just shouldn't exist. Like, the material and the concentration that it exists in these parts should not be a thing, and the fact that this is also like thousands of years old throws them even more. So then they start to collect all of these parts to put them together and try and figure out the purpose of this, as well as trying to figure out like who made it, who buried it, and the whole situation behind that. So this is definitely a series that is best enjoyed through audio. I did really like listening to Sleeping Giants. I did think it was a little bit repetitive in parts in ways that could be potentially tedious if you read it like physically with your eyeballs. So I do think the audio is the way to go. It's very entertaining with a full cast, and I'm excited to get back into this as a much lighter audiobook read than Wheel of Time is. Something else that's going on my Patreon aside from my fantasy romance book club is a very low-key unofficial read along of the Pretty Little Liars series by Sarah Shepard. So every month we have a 24-hour readathon. It alternates between like which tiers participate in the 24-hour readathon, but myself and a few of my patrons are currently reading through this series because it's just so addictive, and I really am enjoying my time reading it. As you'll know, Pretty Little Liars is a book series that the very popular TV show was based on, following a group of girls whose friend goes missing, and around 2 years after that they kind of have to get back together to figure out what's going on when they start to receive a series of threatening messages. So they get together to try and figure out like who's doing this to them, especially because the messages are all signed with the initial A, which is the first initial of their friend that went missing. This is like the peak of like media that was presented to teenage girls in the early 2000s, which I mean isn't great. It truly isn't great, but it is really a good time. It's super compelling. I'm hooked, and I'm going to be reading book 5 in July, which is Wicked. So while we are on the topic of Patreon, I feel like it is a good time to pick my Inner Circle book for July. So this is a jar full of recommendations from the Inner Circle tier of my Patreon, which is the top tier, and every month I pull a book out of here and I aim to read it in the month or two that follows. So we're currently in the period where this is being refilled, so we're getting lots of new stuff added in here, and as usual I am excited and terrified to see what we're going to be picking for this month, because the range in here is truly wild. Like, we have fantasy, romance, like smut, non-fiction, and everything kind of in between, but I'm gonna go with they're all gonna fall out. I've got like a really old one. I'll put the green one back. This one was added in 2023, no, 2022, and it is, what is it? It's Fantasy Lover by Sherilyn Kenyon, and it's April's pick. So this is paranormal romance. I think I have this, so I'm just gonna go grab it. Okay, so I do not have Fantasy Lover by Sherilyn Kenyon. I do have Night Pleasures, which is book 2, and the reason why I have this is because there's conflicting opinions on where you should start with this series. I am a little bit wary because I don't love paranormal romance, but I know this was a popular one, so I'm definitely open to giving it a try. And I do like some paranormal romance. Just generally not a fan. It is the first book in, I think, the Dark Hunter series, the Dark Hunter world, and the reading order does apparently start with Fantasy Lover. So I think that this relates to ancient Greece, which is kind of interesting. So there is a character called Julian who has been cursed into an eternity of slavery by his own brother, and then the main character is convinced to perform a spell as a joke by her friend who is a psychic, and she ends up with this guy trapped in her living room, which is reminding me a lot of the Kingdom of the Wicked series by Kerry Maniscalco. Oh, and then apparently part of this spell is that the main character will lose her sanity if he returns to his captivity, so she has to figure out how to free him. So I'm definitely intrigued to give this series a go, but whether I will like it, we'll just have to wait and see. Something that I am rolling over, I think I'm only rolling over 2 things to this TBR from June. I'm not even going to talk about these. I'm just going to say that I am still trying to start my reread of the Stormlight Archive, and I think by the time we get to July, I will have read the novella that I need to in Arcanum Unbounded. So hopefully in July I can at least read The Way of Kings Part 1, if nothing else. Maybe. And then the last 3/4 books that I'm adding to this TBR are all library books, guys. I have unfortunately had all of my reservations that I think I've had holds placed on these books since April, and they've decided to all come in at once, which is just a little bit rude. But one that I am rolling over is The Will of the Many by James Islington. I did very much intend to read this one in June, but I've been pre-filming some content. This is a 5-star prediction for me, and I can't have another best book. Like, I can't have a book in June that is better than a book that I've already read, because I've already pre-filmed my best books of the year so far video. So I have decided to roll this one over to July. This one is a adult fantasy that is inspired by the Roman Empire, following this guy who is joining this academy to become like an elite warrior, but he's doing it to it's very much like Red Rising. He's trying to break this academy apart from the inside, but he's told everybody that he's there because he really wants to succeed. For the holds that I have coming in, 2 of them are definitely coming in, and then there's one that I just don't know what's happened, but that might also come in July. I'll get to that one last, but the first one is already waiting for me to collect. I'm gonna go get them at the beginning of next week, and that is Powerless by Lauren Roberts. Now, I'm gonna be real, I was gonna read the synopsis. I have no idea what this is about. It's a YA fantasy romance, and the TikTok girlies are losing their minds over it. That's literally all I know. That's all I'm going into it knowing. I've heard that it's kind of more of a fun time than anything, so I'm kind of prepared. But essentially everyone was talking about it. I don't want to buy it, but I wanted to see what the hype was about, so I put a hold at my library. The one that's currently in transit is one of my most anticipated releases of the year, which is The Warm Hands of Ghosts by Catherine Arden. So The Bear and the Nightingale by Catherine Arden is one of my favorite series of all time, and this one is a World War I story about a girl who is a nurse during the war, and I think her brother dies. We're following this timeline where I think she's going to volunteer in a hospital like after all of this has transpired, and then another kind of timeline reality perspective where the boy that died wakes up after an explosion. He ends up trapped with a German soldier, and they have to form an alliance to claw their way out of this situation. A little bit nervous about this one because I don't really like war fiction, but I do really like Catherine Arden, so we'll see how it plays out. And then the one that I just have no idea what happened. Okay, so if you watch Shelf It or Scrap It, you will know that I put in a purchase request at the library for Gold by Raven Kennedy. Now, I don't know if this is normal across all libraries, but for my library, when you put in a purchase request, you can't see what what you did. So I can't see that form again, but I just have to trust that I filled it in correctly. So I got an email very shortly afterwards that was like, we're gonna buy your book. The headline was Gold, which is the title of the book that I have requested. And they were like, yeah, we're gonna buy this book. We put a hold on it for you. We'll let you know when it's available. So I assume that that was added to my hold list. So I went into my hold list and I clicked on this book that I assume is Gold by Raven Kennedy. And it said that it was going to a library that isn't my local one in a town that I'm not really going to be in anytime soon. And it said it was in transit. So I was like, cool, I'll just cancel it. I'll find the book again. I'll put a new hold on it at the library that I want it to be collected at. So I did that. And then I put a reservation down for the book again, for the library I wanted it to go to. And I looked this morning before I made this video, and I've put a hold on the wrong book. I've put a hold on book 4, which is a book that I've already read. And so I cancelled that, and then I went back into the library catalogue to search for book 5 to put a hold on it, and it doesn't exist. And normally, like when I did this for The Familiar by Leigh Bardugo, which is the only hold that I have remaining that hasn't come in yet, and when I did it for The Warm Hands of Ghosts by Catherine Arden, it said that they were on order when they were on order and they hadn't arrived yet. This just doesn't exist. So because I have anxiety, I'm probably actually going to go to the library today because it's like not actually that far away and ask, because I don't know what's happened. But there is potential that Gold by Raven Kennedy is going to come in this month and that I'm going to be reading that, because after the cliffhanger that book 4 ended on, I need to read book 5 immediately, and then book 6 I think is released in August, so maybe I'll request that my library purchase that for me as well, and hopefully that whole process will be smoother than this process has been. I'm sure everything's fine, it's just I have anxiety as we've established, and I like to get all of these things smoothed out straight away, so I need to go find out what's happening. But this is book 5 in a fantasy romance series that I really enjoy. It's a little bit darker, it's King Midas retelling with some really cool twists, and I need to know where book 5 is going. So that is my July TBR. As I mentioned, it's a lot. I know it's a lot. I know I'm not going to get through it all, but those are my reading plans for the month. Down in my comments, let me know what your reading plans are for July and how everything is, how you anticipate everything going with that. And if you would like to let me know you were here but you don't feel like you have anything to say, leave a gold coin emoji in my comments. But aside from that, guys, please don't forget to like this video if you liked it and subscribe if you wanna. If you head to my description box, you'll find a link to my Goodreads, Instagram and Patreon if you would like to join me on any of those. But that's it from me today, guys. Bye.
Oh, you bite your friend like chocolate. You say you'll go where nobody knows, with guns hidden under our petticoats. We're never gonna quit it, no, we're never gonna quit it, no.